that it is driven by data that is verifiable and not just the deepest part of our emotion. But in addition to being accurate, in addition to being accessible, it should also be applicable. Because what good is a set of ancillary facts if we don't know what to do with them? It is not just about what we know, but it is about what we do with what we know that makes all the difference in the world. Martin King said that education without morals was extremely dangerous, as a ship without a sail. And so it's our job to create experiences that are diverse, that are equitable, that are inclusionary, and that meet the needs of our 21st century society. We've had a lot of discussion as it relates to issues regarding CRT, whether it's culturally responsive teaching or whether it's critical race theory. We've had a lot of discussion about the politics that have infused themselves in our local school boards, not just here, but in our entire country. We had a lot of discussion as it relates to issues related to parental rights and a parent's ability to actually choose and fashion the type of education that our children receive. And the only reason we're here tonight is to hopefully engage in a conversation that says that my intelligence isn't based on the fact that I know all the answers, but it is based on the fact that I can challenge the answers that I have. I'm hopeful that we are so open-minded today as we dialogue that we will even challenge some of our own long-held assertions, that we will be willing to come to a place where we can hear each other, knowing that at the end of the day, our primary desire is that our children learn. And so I welcome every single one of you today. Welcome you to roll up your sleeves with us. Welcome you to ask the tough questions and to have a conversation that is long overdue. Because whether inequity is intentional and malignant, or whether it is unintentional, the effects are still the same on our children. We know that when we create a system of public education that serves everyone, then everyone does well. Likewise, we know that when we don't educate our children, calamity waits around the corner. I read this book from time to time, and it says that my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Our society is on the brink of danger simply because we refuse to give the gift to our children that people died for, that people fought for: education. So I welcome you. I thank every one of you for coming. I pray and hope that you will, again, be open-minded and that we can engage in constructive dialogue for the betterment of our young people. And I want to bring up a Miss Jenny Romani. She's a board member of a sister organization of ours in Culpeper called the Piedmont Race Amity Project. And she is going to come and give further remarks. Please greet her with a hand clap.
Good evening. Thank you everyone so much for making the time to making it tonight. A little bit about the Piedmont Race Amity Project. As Dr. Harris was making reference of pulling up your sleeves and getting ready to work, we with the Piedmont Race Amity Project believe that everybody has the capacity and the opportunity to do a lot of good in their community. And we try to integrate every kind of person from any kind of walk of life to engage with us in challenging conversations that get us to think a little bit more in depth about the experiences that other people in our community are experiencing on the daily. So we welcome you all to follow us on Facebook. It's called the Piedmont Race Amity Project. We also have a poster outside, so if you have a smartphone, we have a QR code ready for you. We would welcome anyone who's also interested in becoming a facilitator or a part of these discussions. Feel free to talk to me. You can talk to Cindy. You can talk to Ren. Even Joan McBride out in the table outside. We have a lot of goodies for you out there. So we're just really thankful to be a part of tonight and to be a part of this discussion that requires so much dedication and also really a desire to want to be here. So thank you, and I commend everyone in this room. So thank you so much.
We want to bring up a very special guest tonight, Dr. Janet Gullickson, who was appointed as the first woman president of Germanna Community College beginning in 2017. She previously held leadership positions with the Colorado Department of Higher Education and Community College Systems, the Minnesota State Colleges and University Systems, the community colleges of Spokane, Washington. Germanna Community College is the 5th largest community college in Virginia, serving approximately 12,300 students annually with more than 800 full and part-time employees in suburban and rural regions, larger in total land area than the state of Delaware. Through its multiple campuses and sites, the college has grown in overall enrollment over the last 4 years by nearly 18%, with a 25% increase in African American enrollment, one of the few community colleges in the country to grow. Germanna has been recognized twice as one of the top 150 colleges in the country by the Aspen Institute, as well as achieving the high national rankings by Wallet Hub, the Aspen Institute, Johns Hopkins University, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. All of them have examined the best practices of Germanna, and the community college has been featured in several national publications and podcasts. I bring to you Dr. Janet Gullickson of Germanna Community College. Please welcome her.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here tonight, and I really want to thank our hosts, Madison Public Schools, for having your facility open to us, and the work that all people in the counties that we're serving are undertaking to make sure that all students are educated. You know, lately I've been more and more offended by the term wokeness. Does that offend you? It is so offensive to me because the notion is that it's fatty and that it has a political kind of basis, that it is something that happens only to certain people because of other people, and that those people aren't really sincere in the efforts they're trying to make to educate every person. I'm here to tell you that wokeness is a badge of honor, and if you want to wear it, you should. If I want to wear it, I should. But my wokeness started when I was born on a farm in South Dakota. And on that farm in South Dakota, I was raised as a Christian. I was raised to believe that all people should have opportunity and prosperity. I was raised to believe that there is no person among us better than the others of us. I was also raised on a farm in South Dakota in a Native American community. I don't think it takes rocket science to realize that Native Americans are treated differently when they go into stores, when they go to school, when they are in their families, when they are stopped by police. I saw it all my life. I got out of the speeding tickets, my Native friends didn't. Just one kind of glib, but really, really insightful experience for me. So my gift to myself is to be able to live in these communities that we serve and learn more and more about how Germanna Community College can do the right thing. And by the way, the fact of the equity gap, and it's a fact, as you said, Dr. Josiah, that's not a black problem. That's because we, in a predominantly white educational system, have not figured out how to reach all children who aren't white. And so at Germanna, we're spending a lot of time figuring that out, to the point where we watch what we put in our marketing materials. We publish the success rates of non-white students or black students and white students to our faculty and say, explain to me why more African American students are failing your class than white. Because the accountability for that class and for that grade and for that success lies, yes, with the students, but mostly with a community college that understands how to teach students who are not like the majority of our faculty, who understands that we have to hire more and more people of color in order to look like the communities we serve. Finally, I want to say this. Well, integration was so hot and cool. Integration resulted in the layoffs of tens of thousands of African American teachers in our country. Because, you know the logic, we can't possibly have African American teachers in an integrated school. So we got to get the white teachers in the integrated schools. Think about the damage, the decades and decades and decades and decades of damage that taking the black teacher out of the classroom has done for our African American students. So at Germanna, we're pretty forthright with our commitment to truth and reconciliation. We're pretty forthright in owning our own responsibility and learning from the people like on this panel, because I surely don't know the answers. But we are committed with you as communities and with panelists as experts as these to find it, because it is unconscionable in a country as wealthy as ours that not all students have opportunity and success. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Gullison. I now want to bring to the podium Mr. Caleb Hackley. He is a Virginia native from Culpeper County, where he graduated from the Eastern View High School. While there, he was very active in student life, specifically student government, serving as the class president of Eastern View High School for 3 years before serving as the student body president. After high school, he attended Hampton University, earning a bachelor's degree in political science while interning for the Virginia State Senate. Caleb currently works for Bose Allen Hamilton as a consultant aligned to the global defense sector and is a proud member of the local NAACP chapter. Please welcome Caleb.
Good evening. It is sincerely a pleasure to be here with you all to talk about something so important and so critical, something that's so fundamental to us as a society and as a people that if we don't get it right, we will damn ourselves to oblivion. My task is simple, and in my remarks, I would like to draw attention to a couple quotes that guide and inspire me on my path, my lifelong journey of education. My personal anecdote was that I grew up in an environment where education was not just fundamental and important, it was almost spiritual. I came from a household with a grandmother who was a janitor at the local middle school, but who had such a passion for education and had such a passion for her children and her children's children and their children beyond, generations beyond, being afforded every opportunity that she took every single moment that she could to reaffirm in us the principles of learning, the principles of seeking out better information and of applying that knowledge in form of wisdom. In other words, as the words of my alma mater, an education not only for the head, but for the hands and for the heart. The first quote that I want to bring to you was actually by Associate Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. And he said that a person's mind, stretched by new ideas, may never return to its original dimensions. Now that quote is especially powerful considering that education is not just a way forward, right? It's not just a way to put food on the table or clothes on our backs, right? But education is a way of life. Education is a way that we reach out to our peers in the community, the way that we integrate ourselves in the great human tapestry, right, of existence, right? Education, when done the right way, empowers and lifts everyone in the community, especially those who weren't specifically thought of or held dear in the minds of those who designed the system, right? The second quote I want to leave you with was written by a personal example of mine, right? And he said, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. How can we design or have a future with liberty and justice for all, with equity for all and prosperity for all, if we don't start now in our system with children? How can we learn to live with each other in peace and harmony and to work out our differences? And how can we learn to better elevate this republic we call home if we don't start in our school systems? How can we move forward and not repeat the same mistakes that our forefathers and foremothers did if we are not honest with our children about what those mistakes are? How can we continue the forward march of civilization and progress if we aren't truthful with ourselves and committed to moving forward as one unit, as one body, as one community? None of that should be divisive. None of that should cause alarm or fear. That is simply a commitment to unity, a commitment to a quality of life for all, right? It's an idea, the great idea that we chase after, of equity, right? Of fairness and freedom and justice for all, not just in our civic life, but in our educational life, in our spiritual lives, and in the lives of our family, right? And lastly, and I think that this quote speaks specifically to the time and the place that we are here in this Commonwealth and, of course, across this country, is if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Caleb. We appreciate that. I now want to bring up another product of the Culpeper County school system, and Mr. Jason Ford. Jason Ford graduated from Culpeper County High School in 2016. His continued educational journey brought him to the University of Mary Washington, where he studied political science. After graduation during the pandemic in 2020, he brought back many of the passions he formed at Mary Washington home with him to Culpeper. And one of those passions was being community service and involvement. Since returning to Culpeper, Jason began his career in the nonprofit industry, helping citizens of Culpeper, Madison, and the surrounding counties attain suitable and sustainable employment. Understanding the importance of training and education needed for many jobs, His goal was to provide guidance to people looking for it, looking to enter an industry or make a career change. Jason was able to enter the industry that he once studied with the same passion for community service. Please join me in welcoming Jason Ford, who will share a few words and then introduce all of our panelists. Jason.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for the introduction, Ms. Uzziah. It is truly a pleasure to be here with everyone this evening. Usually when I do public speaking, I like to speak from the heart, but I think with the importance of this event tonight, I wanted to make sure I got my words in order. I believe this event could not have come at a more appropriate time in our country and in our state of Virginia. For some background, I served on the Education Committee at the NAACP chapter at Mary Washington. I knew back then that differences in cultural and societal understanding didn't come directly from a deficiency in care. It was simply a lack of education on specific topics. I was unaware of the term equitable education until I joined the Education Committee here with the local NAACP. And through projects and teachings from Dr. Blackman, I began to realize that I myself have had teachers in my educational career that taught me and my peers with that in mind. I tend to credit my outlook on education to one very impactful and sound-minded teacher in my junior year of high school. A man that didn't look, didn't sound, and didn't talk like me, but understood at its core what education was, a lifelong journey. The simple planting of a seed, understanding that you can learn things, relearn things from a different perspective, and even reevaluate what you know when presented with information from a different source. What a profound thing to tell a high schooler at a time when he was just trying to get good enough grades to make sure his parents were not mad at him. To keep my remarks within my given time frame, the core of the lesson my teacher was conveying was to keep an open mind throughout my life around the idea of learning. To know that there should never be a moment where you know everything, and that through experiences with people and in your careers, there was always something for you to learn. Equitable education, to me, encompasses that same belief. And it is practically done by ensuring both students and adults beyond their heyday of high school and collegiate education have access to resources, books, and materials that make them a more informed human being. And with that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists this evening. Dr. Tiffany Ray is the Vice President of Student Services and Equity and Advancement and the Chief Diversity Officer at Germanna Community College, a position she has held since 2018. She previously served as the Interim Dean of Enrollment Management at Virginia Peninsula Community College and has held positions at Old Dominion University, the College of William and Mary, and Virginia Tech. Dr. Ray is a graduate of Old Dominion University, where she majored in business administration. She also holds a master's degree in business administration and a PhD in higher education from Old Dominion University. Dr. Ray serves on the Old Dominion University's Strom College of Business, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the University of Mary Washington Center for Community Engagement and Community Advisory Committee, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Council for the Community Foundation of the Rappahannock River Region. She is a board member for Rappahannock United Way, Did Lake Incorporated, and HERDI Innovate. She also volunteers with the Community Foundation's Youth in Philanthropy Program. She was elected by Old Dominion University Alumni Association as part of their inaugural 40 Under 40 class. Our next panelist, Dr. Amy Tillison Brown, is a professor of history and the Dean of College for Women at the University, or Mary Baldwin University. She teaches courses in African American, United States, Women's, and African Diaspora History. She also directs the African American Studies and Public History programs while advising Phi Alpha Theta, the National History Honor Society, and serving as a member of Mary Baldwin University's Coalition for Racial and Social Justice. Dr. Tillison Brown is completing her book manuscript, Black Women and the Freedom Struggle in Prince Edward County, Virginia, 1880 to 1965. The book analyzes the activism of Black women in the county before and during the public school crisis that began in 1951, the student strike and the protest of inadequate educational facilities, and ended with the reopening of public schools that had been closed from 1959 to 1964 in resistance to the desegregation mandate of the Brown decision. She also has produced a documentary, Voices from Port Republic Road, which focuses on the experiences of alumni from the Rosenwald School. This project documents the interconnectedness of school, church, and businesses in a mid-20th century rural black community, along with the challenges of public school segregation and integration. Her other research interests include the activism of women of women of Native American descent in Virginia and the Carolinas, and race and criminalization in Virginia from 1870 to 1950. Prior to her position at Mary Baldwin, she was the director of African American Heritage Program at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities at the University of Virginia. She has taught in the history departments at Virginia Tech, Morgan State University, and Piedmont Virginia Community College, and worked as a public school teacher and counselor in Roanoke City Public Schools and Baltimore City Public Schools. Our next panelist, Dr. Kathleen Gentry, serves as an assistant principal in an inner city high school as an educational advocate for students who are at risk of dropping out. She holds a doctorate in college teaching and sociology, a PhD in higher education administration, and a certificate in advanced graduate study in educational leadership. She has worked in the public education sector for 14 years in a variety of capacities, including positions within the Madison County Public Schools, which has provided her with an equity lens. Dr. Gentry believes that educational equity is the gateway to academic success for all students, as it could close achievement and opportunity gaps. She believes that it is a time for educators to be more courageous and demonstrate that all students matter. Dr. Uzziah Harris has been making long-term investments in people's lives. Since early days as a middle school teacher in Richmond in the late 1990s, he has also served as a qualified mental health professional, recreation center supervisor, human services program administrator, city council legislative liaison, and ecclesiastical leader. Dr. Harris received his undergraduate degrees in psychology and education from the College of William and Mary, and completed his theological studies at the Virginia Triumphant College and Seminary, where he earned both his Master's of Divinity and Doctorate of Divinity. He is also a graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University Grace E. Harris Minority Political Leadership Institute and the Sorensen Political Institute at the University of Virginia. He is currently a graduate student at Mid-America Christian University, where he is completing a master's degree in educational leadership and supervision. Dr. Harris has authored 3 books and is currently the pastor of Unity Baptist Church in Culpeper. He sits on the board of the Wakefield County Day School in Rappahannock County and continues to serve as a middle school teacher within the Culpeper County school system. Dr. Harris also serves as the president of the NAACP Culpeper branch, also serving Madison and Rappahannock County. Dr. Laura Blackman, our moderator for this evening's panel discussion, has been an educator for her entire professional career, beginning within the classroom teaching the grades pre-K through 8th grade. She also has served in a number of school administrative roles, including curriculum development, instructional coaching, professional development, and teacher supervision and evaluation. In her doctoral work at the University of Maryland, she conducted research on teacher learning and classroom implementation of a social justice curriculum in early childhood classrooms. She currently serves as an equity consultant to schools, tutors, children with learning deficiencies or differences such as dyslexia and ADHD, and teaches homeschool classes at her son's co-op in Fauquier County. Dr. Blackman also serves as the chair of the NAACP's Culpeper Branch Education Committee. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests to the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My father's a Baptist minister. I believe in the call response something. I need to make sure you all are still awake. Don't go to sleep on me now. We are so glad to be with you on this beautiful afternoon. Who's still getting used to the weather change? I drove in from Stanton today, and it was a beautiful drive. So happy to be with you all to talk about such a very important topic. Last year, the Washington Post reported that for the first time since the first census in 1790, the number of people who identify as white has declined 2.6%, dropping from 5.1 million people to 19.7 million. The USA is on her way to becoming a majority-minority society. The phrase alone causes me to raise an eyebrow when considering the world demographic, but that's another conversation. Domestic demographics alone provide enough justification for educators to use inclusive pedagogy, but not the only one. Ongoing police brutality, racial disparities and inequity highlighted by COVID-19 pandemic, and other anti-Black violence requires a reckoning and response to our country's racist past and present. Protests since the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and numbers of other men and women caused people to pour into the streets in protest, gaining international audiences. Racism is back on national agendas like never before, with public pledges to do better from corporations, state and local government, and universities. Universities responded to those calls with message of support and promises to tackle higher education. As part of this process, the academy and all educational institutions must evaluate their role in this inequitable system and develop strategies to create a more equitable and just future. Part of this interrogation is considering the classroom space and the teaching going on inside of them. Do they operate with racial bias at the core? Are they inclusive? Are they culturally relevant? Are they anti-racist? Are they equitable? If we care to present materials that keep learning relevant, we must commit and recommit to producing inclusive, culturally relevant, anti-racist curricula. Inclusive pedagogy considers all of the puzzle pieces on that slide. With the changing national demographic and larger access to higher education, inclusivity in the classroom is a key issue. Students come from a diverse range of backgrounds and bring a variety of learning styles, abilities, and experience to each course. Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator and philosopher who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, suggested that learning deepened for students and teachers when students were active in the learning process using what scholars called critical pedagogy, teaching to make a difference, different from the banking model. And I bet all of you have heard it. I bet all of you know a teacher that made a difference in your life, didn't they? Yeah, and I bet you don't remember them for making a difference simply because they made you learn all of the United States and their capital and current governor, right? So it's more to education than that. In fact, what I just said is kind of representative of what educational scholars call the banking model, where students simply accept the information that teachers deposited through lectures and reading assignments. Critical pedagogy requires students to self-actualize and challenges them to improve the world by social critique and political action. Inclusive pedagogy respects all individuals in the classroom and recognizes that teachers, administrators, and students can learn from each other. Inclusive pedagogy, which is by nature also culturally responsive, respects all individuals in the classroom. And again, they recognize that we all learn from each other. So what does it mean when we're talking about an inclusive classroom? And especially in our society today, sometimes it depends on who you're talking to, right? You get some people that hear it and they think, okay, that's a good thing. Then you get some people that hear it and think, oh my goodness, maybe this isn't such a good thing. But I kind of like this cartoon. Anyone familiar with this equity discussion, you probably remember this when this was maybe 1 or 2 pictures, right? But now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pictures that really bring in the piece of inclusion that isn't often discussed. So if we look first at reality, the blurb under it says, one gets more than is needed, while the other gets less than is needed. Thus, a huge disparity is created. Now, that's pretty much the reality, right? We all have been to school before or live in this society. We drive through our neighborhood. There's some neighborhoods with $1 million homes, and there's some neighborhoods with $150 homes. Everyone doesn't have the same thing. The reality is we're not all going to have the same thing, but even in that description, there's a word there, needed, that I think we must consider through this conversation. one might get more than, well, who thinks we need $6 million homes in our community? Do we really need a $6 million home? I mean, if you work hard and buy it, good, more power to you. Invite me to your cookout, right? Yeah, but you know, when you're talking about what's needed, that's one example of a reality. Now look at equality. What do you notice? Everybody has the same thing. Isn't that the nature of equality, where everybody has the same thing? Is that almost setting us up for failure when we say we're going to create a system with humans that's totally equal? Can one human be equal to the other? What does that mean? I mean, it means you've got to be the same height. It means you need to have the same hair color, right? The same eye color. You need to be the same weight, right? And we don't know. The assumption is that everyone benefits from the same supports. This is considered to be equal treatment, but we really got to think about that. Equity. You see some people here, someone who's taller doesn't need a box, so he doesn't have one, and so on. You see the picture. Everyone gets the support that they need, and that creates equity. Now, what's justice? This picture, what do you notice different in the justice picture? What's the first thing that jumps out at you? No fence. There's no barrier at all. Everybody wants to see the game. There's no barrier. All three can see the game without support or accommodation because the causes of the inequity was addressed. And the reason for that inequity was what? The fence. Well, the fence is now gone, so that's justice. And once you've got justice to really make differences in students' lives, I think inclusion is important. What do you think? Everyone's included in the game. No one's left on the outside. We didn't only remove the barriers keeping people out, we made sure that they were valued and involved. And those inclusive, that when we get to that position of inclusivity, inclusion, right, that's kind of the goal that we're looking for if we believe in if we believe in culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching. An inclusive climate welcomes and engages students from all backgrounds and encourages everyone to share their different perspectives. It allows students to fully participate in the classroom experience and assures that the course content itself attends to the issues of every student that's in that classroom. And I'm going to speed on now. Actually, I'll come back to that. The social dynamic that we don't talk about much, and I think it's important for us to introduce and delve into more should you all want to in the discussion, is that of implicit bias. Most people are unaware of the triggers that they carry around that are fed to them by the media about what people that don't look like them do, right? And what they actually are, whether or not these people are good people or bad people, right? Thinking about children, all children go through things, but they aren't treated the same way when they go through it. We can pull discipline rates from any school district in the Commonwealth if it's available to you and see that there are disproportionate numbers of Black and brown children that are being out of school suspended, that are being in school suspended, that have been labeled by the district as discipline problems. Now, how come that happens? Black children, including Black girls, are being pushed out of classrooms and schools simply because of insubordination or disrespect. Now, insubordination from a cultural perspective can be very interesting, for lack of a better word, right? What I might be able to tolerate, a white middle-class teacher may not be able to tolerate. So just because a child has a frown doesn't mean she's being disrespectful. Sometimes a frown means, I've been through a lot here. When we're happy, and when we're not, we're not. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm being insubordinate or not paying attention in class. That doesn't mean that that student might not be respecting the teacher as a teacher. Now, I'm all for getting disrespectful students back on the right track. But sometimes what is labeled as disrespect and the consequence of that disrespect comes from places other than simply just following the curriculum. Implicit bias is something that we should consider. This study from the Yale Child Study Center even went back to preschool and says that preschool teachers tend to more closely observe blacks than whites, especially black boys, when challenging behaviors are expected. And I'll keep going. I'm going to save that funny comment, remind me of it for the discussion that we talk about. So how can you create an inclusive classroom experience? Well, to do that, very briefly, and I hope we can get into it more, we have to ask ourselves questions like, how can I learn more about my biases and mitigate any negative impact? How can we recognize, each of us in here, that we sometimes hold inherently systemic biases that give us, or that when we're in this position of power, can have a negative impact on students. I'm not saying it always does, but sometimes it does. That's for everyone here, and I think we need to recognize that. We have to learn interactions and activities, right? So we need to diversify the way that students are assessed on knowledge. If we have different people learning in different ways, everyone might not do well on a multiple choice test. Everyone might not do well on a 12-page paper with footnotes and Chicago-style documentation. However, right, if we can diversify the ways that students are assessed, offering different learning interactions, that's one way to create a more culturally inclusive classroom, or one that respects differences, learning, cultural, economic, or otherwise. And that kind of goes along with the course design and the syllabi and the curricular choices. And those are things that we can ask ourselves as educators, or even as parents, right, that are concerned about their students, of the educators, about ways that we can create more culturally responsive classrooms. So what is this, very briefly, cultural responsive teaching in a nutshell? Over 2 decades ago, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings introduced the term culturally relevant pedagogy to describe engaging learners whose experiences and cultures are traditionally excluded from mainstream settings. Based on her research of effective teachers of African American students, Ladson-Billings proposed 3 goals on which these teachers' practices were grounded. The first was teaching must yield academic success. That's first and foremost. We come to school to learn. Academic success is important. Second, teaching must help students develop positive ethnic and cultural identities while simultaneously helping them to achieve academically. And teaching must support students' ability to recognize, understand, and critique current and social inequities. And now it's Geneva Gay who coined the term culturally responsive teaching. And this assumes that teachers who employ this use cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for them. In both cases, there's strong emphasis being placed on providing opportunities for students to think critically about inequities in their own peer experiences. I think I better go on. And I think I'll end with Du Bois, a great place to end, huh? We have the somewhat incoherent idea that we are not destined to be harassed with great social questions, and that even if we are and fail to answer them, the fault is with the question and not with us. Consequently, we often congratulate ourselves more on getting rid of a problem than solving it. Addressing racism, more so becoming an anti-racist teacher, is not for the faint at heart. Whether in your day-to-day life or as an educator, it's challenging, to say the least. I don't think many would disagree that racism is obvious in the history of our beloved America. More difficult is convincing people that they individually have power to confront racism, which is the only strategy that will chip away at the unfortunate cornerstone of this nation. I know racism's a problem, but not in my backyard, not here. It's a faraway problem that some people focus too much energy on. I'm reminded of Lucille Clifton's poem, I'm Accused of Tending to the Past. If we just stop talking about racism, it will assuredly go away. Stop talking about it. Don't hold anyone accountable. Get folk to simply pipe down. Bingo, problem solved, because I don't hear people talking about it anymore. But it doesn't really go away. Even worse are those that believe earnestly that they can simply hug out racism. That never works. Racism exists because people with power benefit. It's baked into the legal system, policies, and culture of the nation. It will take more than hugs to shift that trajectory. Problem is, most folk are comfortable and not interested in making any real change. Yeah, we grimace every time we hear of a racist act on the news, but we rarely use the power we have to speak out. Not surprisingly, very few people engage in anti-racist teaching. We're still in the check the box mode. Back in the 90s, when multiculturalism was all the rage, I don't know how many teachers I saw hosting potlucks with food from different cultures and checking their multicultural box for the year. Boy, am I glad we are evolving. Eating cassava and yams or rice and peas doesn't make you any less anti-Black. Yes, it's a good introduction to various cultures, which is fine, but it doesn't encourage students to recognize and challenge the racism that fuels the opportunity gaps, the school-to-prison pipelines, and mass incarceration and disproportionate poverty levels. And I know I have gone over my time, so I think I'm going to stop right there and pick up whatever loose ends need to be tied together in the discussion. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Tillerson-Brown.
Absolutely.
I first want to thank all of you for being here, for listening, and for being willing to come here to help solve the problem instead of just hoping it goes away, and for being willing to have difficult conversations, to challenge your own assumptions. And I'm delighted to see that we have so many people here. I, for one, am honored to be in the presence of everyone on this stage. They are incredible educators, incredible individuals, incredible professionals, so I'm eager to learn more. I have a few questions prepared for our panelists, and they center on topics that we've been discussing through the NAACP Culpeper and its neighboring counties, Madison and Rappahannock. And they're also national issues, and some of them are politically charged. Some of them you'll recognize from statements that the NAACP has made in recent years. And we're hoping that the professionals on this stage can help us think through some of the challenges that we have here locally in Madison. The first question I have is about disparities. And Dr. Tillerson-Brown, you mentioned a lot of this in your presentation. And one of the things that we've focused on as an education committee is identifying disparities, most notably in outcomes. So we focused on looking at SOL data because that is so readily available, also graduation rates, and we've also tried to access disciplinary data as well. But we've also within the committee discussed disparities and opportunities, and I'd love to hear more from all of the panelists about why these disparities exist. You got a great grounding in that from Dr. Tillerson-Brown, but I'd like to hear other voices as well. What causes them, and why do they matter for schools? Why is that a school issue, and why is that a school problem that needs to be addressed?
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Addressing the disparities are very important. We are all educators, and we all want all kids to do well. I would like to note, though, that equity is not just about race. Equity is also about sexual orientation, gender. It's about socioeconomic status. And I think a lot of times we focus so much on the racial aspect that we don't realize that a lot of us go across different patterns. What that means by that, for instance, an African-American female could have the 3 isms: racism, right, sexism, and classism, correct? Disparities happen because we're all different and all school systems have different resources, et cetera. Equity is really, really, really important because it not only says that we're going to give everyone a pair of boots, but we're going to give you a pair of boots that fit. And I think as we get to looking at how we are failing our youth, is that we're making it only a black and white issue. We need to look at the fact that kids are kids no matter where they are, whether they're in a rural area or whether they're in our inner city or suburban area. Kids are kids. And do we want them all to do well? Yes. A lot of times when we factor a lot on just racial issues, that people make it a black and white issue. And so therefore, people are being turned off based upon just race. Think about kids being kids, and we want all kids to be successful. Disparities happen because people come from different walks of life, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different support systems, different types of families, and things that are totally out of their control. Out of some people's control, and some maybe not. We need to look at how we're going to close the gaps, not only close the achievement gaps, but close opportunity gaps. And what I mean by opportunity gaps, gaps in which people can live to their best potential. If a student is struggling in reading, why not look at ways in which we can actually assist that kid in being a better reader? Providing family help. So what I'm trying to say tonight is that it's important that we look at the big picture and not just focus on race, but focus on socioeconomic, focus on gender, focusing that we're not going to limit a child or label a child based upon where they live, and look at where it really lies. It really lies more at the politics of it. A lot of things change from Richmond, and then once we have a new governor, things changed again. But I think we should be looking at equity because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a black and white issue. It's the right thing to do for every child. And I think even when you look at Madison, we started with the Equity Task Force. We did a lot of good work in the Equity Task Force, but then we got a new school board, and then people voted. And so all I'm trying to say is if we want change, then maybe that's the way that we can start, is there. If you want change, why don't we get out there and vote and educate those more who need the additional support, right, to make a good decision, and then overturn those who are in positions of power that are not making the right decisions. And that would be a really, really, really good start. Also, for looking at Richmond, our governor, we got some time yet, but getting out the vote to make sure that we can get things changed again. It's the right thing to do. It's the right time to do it. And disparities happen because things a lot of time are out of our circumstance. But you had a good point too, is that the census data is changing, and that it will become a majority. And what would happen then when the tables are turned? What would it matter? It will matter. And I think until we have as well courageous leaders, a lot of things aren't going to be changed. It's not that people don't want to change, but people need to be able to make decisions that they're not based upon whether or not they'll keep their jobs or not, because they have families to take care of as well. So we have to have people who are courageous enough to be able to do those things, but not be, I would say, affected or negatively impacted based upon the fact they want to make the right decision. I think we need to continue to work with everyone to make sure that we are making gains, but we're only going to do that one step at a time, and not by insulting each other, by helping each other one step at a time.
I think that when you start talking about disparities, one hard truth that we're going to have to come to grips with is that it is a system of design. Mm-hmm. That this system works exactly as it was designed. Horace Mann, who is known as, in some circles, the architect of public education, cites that public education doesn't dismantle privilege, but it actually perpetuates privilege. You can look at schools today, and you can find that over 50% of the kids in our country who go to schools in districts, not schools, but they go in districts that are at least 75% non-white or white. 40% of African American children go to schools that are 90% non-white, which means that schools are every bit as segregated today as they were in '54. That's what that means. And when you talk about political ramifications, when I can see the difference between funding in the city of Richmond public schools or Petersburg public schools and Williamsburg, or see differences in funding in Northern Virginia, where I was educated in high school, and Culpeper or Madison County, it is a system of design. And until we get to the place where we're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and come to the place where we are willing to dismantle the system, then all we are going to get is more of the same. Martin King spoke, and he talked about integration. And when he spoke about integration, he said, integration costs America little. It didn't cost anything to allow African American people to be served. Actually, it helped economically. It helped the base economically, and it destroyed black business. And so when we look at it, he said the next phase of liberation is actually going to cost something, because that requires a financial overhaul. That requires you to understand that children who are in poverty require $2.2 more than the student who is not in poverty. That means you are going to have to reallocate resources in such a way that parents who have children who are not privy to pre-K education can have pre-K education. That means that we are going to have to be more diligent as it relates to trade and vocational programs for particularly minority students whose academic thrust or bend isn't college, so that when they come out of high school, they have a viable means to take care of themselves, their families, and not revert to crime. But this costs something. And as long as we dance around the issue that much of what ails us is by design, and that it is working according to plan, then it will continue to be the way it is planned.
So for me, I think from the community college perspective, there are a lot of things that community colleges do. Chief among them are developing workforce for our communities. And that development doesn't start with the community college. Obviously, we're open access, so we're accepting students at all different ability levels. That starts in the K-12 system. And so we see students arriving to our doors, and those disparities that were mentioned earlier persist. They don't magically go away when students enter post-secondary education. They continue. The ramifications to that disparity, or those disparities, are our workforce needs aren't met. That if we can't develop skills in our students at an early age and continue them on in post-secondary education, I'm not just speaking of four-year undergraduate degrees, I'm speaking of any skill and talent development, be it a certification or otherwise, that's necessary. When we don't have the talent to meet the needs of our workforce, we don't have talent to meet the needs of our workforce. And I say that because you're feeling the effects of those types of things right now. You feel those things in your pockets, you see those things in your grocery stores. That's what a labor shortage does. That's what skill scarcity does in our communities. And that starts in K-12. And so what we really need to do is make sure that we're taking a look at the continuum of education, that it starts from early childhood, that it goes through our post-secondary educational opportunities, and make sure that we're lifting up all of our students, because we've already mentioned the demographic changes in this country that are going to impact our workforce even more. So this is an entire educational system issue. This is an issue related to how we can meet the needs of our community. But I think from a human perspective, these are our neighbors. These are our children. We want engaged, we want productive citizens, and that starts as early as the students that we're seeing in early childhood and K-12. So I think that's why these disparities are going to manifest into something a lot larger than simply whether or not somebody passes an SOL or not.
So we've gotten a fantastic grounding in why the disparities exist historically, why they matter, and why it's urgent. So we have a very immediate need is that we have students in school who do not have access to success. They do not have access to well-being in equitable ways. And then you have the ultimate outcome for our communities, which is a workforce issue. So what I'd love to hear from all of you, what we need to hear from all of you is what are some of the answers? Because we are not flying blind in K-12 education. We do have some guidance as to what works and what helps to close gaps, what helps to address disparities, what helps to foster success for all students, what helps to foster well-being for all students. So panelists, please share your thoughts.
We need to remove the barriers that make it likely for kids not to be successful. I've always said that I never believed in gifted education because I believe every child is gifted in their own right. And there are some things that we focus on more than others. Kids do better when they see people who look like them in front of the classrooms. Administrators who were in their offices, people on the school board, people working on their behalf in the community. Those things are very important. And also kids want to see themselves reflective in the things that we're learning. And so within the curriculum, it's nice to be able to read about various people, James Baldwin, et cetera, Maya Angelou, et cetera, Toni Morrison, et cetera. And so it's nice to be able to, not only nice, but it's the right thing to do. Kids are going to be leaving the school system and going into a diversified workforce. So it's important that while they're in a supportive and nurturing environment, that they have exposure to that right in and there. In terms of predictive barriers, if you look at students who are allowed to get into AP classes, sometimes it's so difficult. The barriers are it's so difficult that they won't be able to achieve it. Doesn't mean that they can't do the work. They're just not provided opportunities to be able to do that work. And so I just think that until we start removing the barriers, being frank, right, and open to ourselves and to others, that there are certain things that they can't do, they're not going to be able to do unless we can remove those things. They're not going to be successful. And it is a difference in terms of the resources that are given to Northern Virginia schools opposed to given schools here or Nelson, et cetera, in terms of what we do. And the biggest gap really is between the kids, among the kids with special needs. That's a major gap. And we haven't even addressed that. But I know that we can't continue to do this. We can always recognize the gaps, but if we don't do anything to close them, what's the point of opening Pandora's box if you're not ready to do anything about it? And I just say that we owe every child the opportunity to be successful. Because if not, then we're a bunch of hypocrites. We tell kids all the time that educators, if you work hard, that you're going to be able to achieve everything that you want to achieve. No, you can't. Because if those barriers are in your way, sometimes it's going to be a lot difficult to get to point A to point B. And if you start looking at social economic, that's even worse. I think you were talking about in terms of trying ignorance to being more expensive. It is very expensive to be ignorant. And so again, until we really realize that every kid deserves the right to be successful, you can't put your hair on a pillow, you can't turn a blind eye, you can't believe that I don't see color. Yeah, you do. I want you to see me. I'm important. I work very hard for you to see me. And it's time for us to get courageous and start doing something to help all these children.
The one thing I would say as a middle school teacher is I think we definitely have to invest in our educators. Just as a question, point of privilege, I hope you don't mind, how many educators are here tonight? Wow. And let me share with you that when you tell those educators, as they told them in Arizona, all you need to do is get out of high school and we'll let you start teaching. When these teachers have taken classes during the course of their career to maintain licensure, when you tell them, and my father is retired military, my grandfather is a World War II veteran, my great-grandfather is a World War I veteran. I went to Department of Defense schools. I love the military. But when you tell me just because you're a serviceman, I can drop you in a classroom, and you're going to be every bit as successful as an individual who spent their lives trying to practice this thing. When you tell them that, what you are telling me is that you don't value education. And when the community doesn't value education, then it isn't any surprise to me when our children come through our door and they don't value education. This thing is much more than me being a disseminator of science or math or social studies or whatever my content area is. I am a human development profession. I take courses in educational psychology. I take courses in pedagogy or the practice of teaching versus the subject that I teach. I take courses on group dynamics, and I take courses related to individualizing education, because not everyone is the same height, has the same hair color, speaks the same language, or has the same cultural barriers. This is what we do. And you would never go into a courtroom and tell your lawyer in the middle of the trial, you know, I really don't think you interpreted that law correctly. Why don't you let me take it from here? You don't bother your dentist in the middle of him drilling in your mouth and saying, I think you missed a spot, Doc. Can you go a little farther to the right? And yet every single day it has become fashionable to take educators who went into the profession because they simply had a hope in young people and treat them as if they don't know what they're doing. And I'm going to shine on your superintendent for just a second. When you're able to pay other superintendents who don't have any experience, and she has worked through the ranks, then what you're saying to her is that you don't value her either. And so the first step has got to be, if we believe in these professionals, then we have to listen to some of what they're saying. It is a partnership between parents and the business community and the professionals who spent their lives and their money and their time getting good at it. Secondly, yeah.
I know. I thought he was going to finish too. I was ready for the rest. I heard him say second point. I'm hitting it. All right, ready for the second point. Gosh, I don't know how much more I can add to this question here, talking about what to do in light of the disparities exist. How do we close those opportunity gaps? Gosh, that's really a big question, isn't it? We've already recognized the historical barriers, right, to the or the historical circumstances that have contributed to the barriers and disparities that exist. I agree with Dr. Harris. I mean, with the educators. Most people who are in the teaching profession did so because they want to make a difference and they want to make a positive difference. The conversations, though, that we're having as a community, even surrounding, and I can only imagine being a teacher now and teaching, I'm a historian, right? So teaching history that someone might consider divisive and then call in on that tip line, I'm wondering, do I eat next month? You know, that's not the decision being made by the teacher. Who's making those decisions? You know? So that's one thing I just wanted to say. How does that help with the disparity? Well, I tend to believe that this culturally responsive teaching means something. But if you have a state government that's saying, if you teach this piece of history, you might lose your job. it's really reminiscent to me of remember the McCarthy era? When people were being accused of doing that, and then what the circumstance for that could be. So I think that's one thing we have to really consider if we really care about equitable and culturally responsive teaching. But just as we have teachers who came in and for all of the good reasons that we as educators ascribe to, we have some teachers that still just don't get it right. Especially when it comes to cultural sensitivities, especially when it comes to implicit bias, especially when it comes to, I look at this person and everything that no one has really made me grapple with regard to why I think this person is bad, or why I think this person is up to something, or why it's more convenient for me to kick that person out of my classroom and put them in the system. Because the system that we're talking about of mass incarceration typically does not begin when students graduate high school. And I think that's something we also must think about, right? And how even at the elementary grades, this implicit bias or this lack of value to this person because we don't see them as capable enough, right? What that does for that one individual, but also throngs of individuals that look like he or she or them, right? So that connection, that school to prison pipeline is something that we really must look at. But for districts that really value inclusive pedagogy, then some of the pieces, some of the contributors to that system that are acting counter to those stated goals, then accountability has its place. And without it, all of this is lip service.
You have to clap for that. I don't have much to add because that's brilliant, and I'm a little bit out of depth not being a K-12 teacher, but here's what I know is that we can't lay the burden of fixing a system in the laps of children. And so we've got to take responsibility, and this is something that we've done at the college, of taking a look really intently at how we're delivering our education and taking responsibility for that education and the success of all of our students. And so it's identifying those disparities, acknowledging those disparities, and making sure that there's a plan of action to be able to move the needle on closing those gaps. And so I think it's really important for us to have not only this reckoning socially, but our acknowledgement that these things are happening in our schools and that they're our responsibility and not our children's.
All right, so that is our call to action. All of you here are interested in the well-being and the success of our community's children. That's why you're here. The panelists are also here because they care about the well-being and the success of all of our children. So as we move into the audience Q&A portion, I want everyone to keep that in mind and keep that at the center of your comments. The way this will work is we have two NAACP Culpeper members. We have Jason Ford and Misha Jones who have the mics, and they will move to you. So if you have a question, you can stand and wave them down. Feel free to state your name and the district that you're from, but this is not a school board meeting. You don't have to do that if you don't feel comfortable. Please limit your participation to questions. That is the purpose of the Q&A, is to ask questions. So feel free to give some context to what you're asking, but please don't turn it into a comment because our panelists are here to answer questions. So, and also make sure you keep it brief, just so everyone has a chance to participate. Okay.
My name is Pastor Frank D. Lewis Sr., pastor at Antioch Church here in Madison. and I'm constantly involved with a lot of young people. I have 6 grandchildren in the school system here in Madison now. So it can be hard for me to ask a question here that the panel might be able to answer. But the reason we are here, and y'all got to help me out a little bit. I'm not as adverse as you all are up there. What I'm hearing here is, and what's happening in our community, is that it's talking about what's being taught. What I think our purpose is talking about how we teach what we teach. Isn't that correct? It's not about, because every time we talk about, I don't know if I'm making any sense to you or not, but when we talk about what you all are saying here tonight, doesn't seem to really embrace the real problem that we are having. Oh, it's wonderful, it'll help. But it seems like others are trying to say that this is a race issue, that it's about what should be taught in this system. But I think what we are trying to bring over here tonight is that simply how we teach, whatever it is in the school system. Am I making any sense?
I think you're making good sense. I remember you, and I know it's not too much you can stand up and say and not make sense. And I really think that it's a combination of both of what you're, both things that you're saying at this point. I want to make the point, and I think we did this while we're talking about or making a case for culturally responsive teaching, because we think that will be a great contributor to the opportunity gap as it exists. We also realize the barriers from the state level that may invoke fear in some of the educators that would ordinarily do that and do not, right? And might not because of the political climate right now. So is it important to teach in a culturally responsive way? Yes. Is it also important to realize who might not be wanting that culturally responsive teaching entering the classrooms and what policy they have power to dictate? That is equally as important also. So what's the solution? I think that's where we are now.
Thank you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but my idea is that we're having this forum here tonight to try to solve problems in our community. I'm vice president of the NAACP as well. I didn't state that. But what I'm saying is, when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, somebody jump up with critical race theory. We're not even talking about critical race theory. So what I'm saying is that the combative stuff that's against what we're trying to do is really not making any sense. Those that want to be contrary to what we are trying to do, they'll make it look like a race issue. But this is about all kids, about how teaching is done, to make it equal, as you see up there, equal and inclusive. So I've always had the problem with how are we going to solve this idea, how are we going to get it out of people's heads that we are not trying to talk about, trying to pump up race and all that type of thing. That what we are trying to do is that trying to make an even playing field for everybody.
And we can't do that without understanding the place of race in these conversations.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, we can't do it. I mean, it's convenient, it's easy, it's palatable for us to say, we're not really talking about race here, because once we do, some people get upset and uncomfortable, right? So if we can say, we're not talking about race. We're talking about everything else. We're talking about rich and poor. But to talk about rich and poor, you need to know what % of your community is poor, right? And I don't think you can address with culturally responsive teaching all your poor people through the same lens. Like, I don't think we could do it with all of the rich people through the same lens. There are just so many pieces to the puzzle that are required for inclusive teaching, I'm thinking. But I'm not one that's, I don't mind talking about race. I don't mind talking historically about how race has filtered into all of these conversations. So while I understand fully that it's more comfortable for some people not to discuss it, I see it as quite central to much of especially when you're talking about opportunity gaps in public education. But it's okay if you all don't want to talk about race. I'm fine talking about other things also. But I don't think we can really talk about those other things without understanding the centrality of race and racism either. And we can do that from an economic perspective just historically. If we talk about when public schools came to the state of Virginia in 1870, right, and work our way all the way up and pull your annual superintendent's reports and see how much a black child was worth to the state of Virginia versus a white child. And I say what they were worth to the state of Virginia because that's how much the state of Virginia appropriated for the education. And that's what counted for the salary differences that the NAACP went to fight against in by 1939. And all of that under the leadership of the great Charles Hamilton Houston, right, who trained a cadre of lawyers at Howard University to come up with the strategy to dismantle Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, where separate was never equal, right? And we had the Brown decision of 1954. But even after the Brown decision, and I don't remember the Brown decision personally, but I've done a lot of reading about it. And I know that public schools existed in most communities, especially those in our beloved Virginia, that were either black or white. And I know that after the Brown decision was passed, and then Brown 2 that gave all deliberate speed, then by the late 60s, New Kent, Green versus New Kent County, then all of the busing that went on because people were trying to not have whites and blacks going to school together, despite the fact that the Supreme Court made that ruling in 1954. And because that happened, you saw so many attempts to keep the districts still as separate as possible. And we can go on and on about that. But we don't have to go back to 54 to talk about how money is not funneled equitably to schools that just happen to be predominantly minority and schools that just happen because nothing just happens to be. Everything has a history, and everything is the way it is because of decisions that those in power make. And I don't know if I'm going down the right road right now or not, so I think I better stop.
Pastor Lewis, you have a point. We are not only talking about what's being taught, but also how it's being taught. Teachers have always been told how it's being taught. If you go through various stages of bloom, it tells you what you need to teach and how you're gonna teach it. However, culture responsive teaching is very important for kids to see themselves within the curriculum. We know that actually is one of the things that will close gaps. It also enriches all children. If we're going to live in a multicultural environment, it's going to be important, and even in the workforce, it's going to be important for them to have exposure. And so, yes, that's the conversation that we're having today. It's not only about how it's being taught, but what is being taught.
I want to add one more thing, Pastor, and that is part of the fruit of this particular environment is understand what happened to us in 1920, right? 2019 and 2020 with your COVID-19 pandemic, and for the first time in a long time, parents were made privy to, not because the schoolhouse had closed its doors, but because the school was now in the house. And parents were, maybe for the first time, paying a whole lot of attention to what their children were learning. Some parents were not shocked at all with what their children were learning. Some parents were quite upset with what children were learning. And so what you have is the same type of situation in 1992 when they began the No Child Left Behind movement. We have a reform movement in education. And I think that that's important. I think that that's good because we have to continue to evolve if we're going to create an educational product that vaults us to the top of educational institutions or countries in the 21st century. There's nothing wrong with the discussion that is going on. Part of the problem, however, is as a result of that, the mistrust between the educational, so-called institutional educational professionals and the larger community has become exacerbated. So that we don't trust our superintendents, we don't trust our teachers, we don't trust our building administrators with our children. And we have to have forums such as these so that people can hear what is really going on, so that we can dialogue about the problems, the vices and the virtues of the educational industry. That is the only way we can work together to come up with palatable solutions to the problem. Because right now, you have parents who don't necessarily know what's going on in the schools. You have community or businesses that want to kind of insert their thoughts about what should take place in the schools so that children are ready to enter the workforce. And without that type of collaboration and without that type of trust, it can't happen. So part of what we're doing here, hopefully, is having healthy dialogue and discussion so that people are educated about education, for goodness sake. Because the days of, Johnny, what did you learn at school today? And Johnny being forthcoming about what happened in school today are next to none. So we have to be better educated so that the misinformation that you hear from news outlets, the misinformation you hear from certain persons, and all persons on all sides of the aisle engage in misinformation. It is up to us to make sure we have accurate information so that we can make decisions for our children that make sense.
My name is Marcia Kirkpatrick. I'm from Madison County. I was really struck by, I should have known this, by learning that at the time of integration, all of the black teachers became unemployed, and therefore all of the black children had only white teachers. And I'm wondering, what is the situation today? How easy or how many black men and women are interested in going into teaching, and how many are being employed by our schools? It seems to me that if children don't have role models right there who look like them, it's a lot harder if they're going to just rely on white people figuring out how to be culturally sensitive. I mean, we all need people who understand us without our having to explain ourselves.
Amen. Thank you so much for that. I am an African-American male. African-American people, about 40 million persons in this country, represent 11, 12-ish% of the population. I represent, as an African-American male, less than 2% of the teaching profession. And so when we generalize this, understand, we think of things such as community policing, where it is important to have police officers that reflect the diversity in their community so there's relatability. We understand how important that is in community policing. We understand how important that is in business, where we have failed to understand it as much as in education, right? And so it comes down to, all right, well, and I've heard this in many cases with many rural districts, black people don't want to come here. Well, you're darn right, they're not going to want to come here if they get the idea that they're not welcomed. That's number one. But number two, my question is to school districts, central offices across the country, where are you recruiting? Because at every historically black college and university, there are education departments that are thriving, that are producing some of the best educational minds in America. As a matter of fact, the most educated subgroup in America happens to be African American women, which you can see evidenced on this particular podium. So it is not a matter of African American people not wanting to come in. It is a matter of resistance for whatever reason, and I say that somewhat facetiously. For whatever reason, we are unwilling to go through the lengths to hire, to recruit, to go find some of those black minds who, by the way, will love everybody's child. Because I don't know if anybody knows, when you are a minority, what you understand is that everybody deserves dignity. What you get used to is being the small or the least in the room and learning how to work with other people. What you learn is that all of us really have so much more in common than we have different. And so you don't have to worry about your children being in front of me. I can promise you that I love children, and children love me, of all stripes, of all religions, of all persuasions, of all ages, of all, of all, of all.
You do make a good point, though, but you have to be culturally competent before you can be responsive. And so a lot of times if people feel and they see things in the newspaper, in the media, and it feels like it's not a welcoming environment, they're not going to want to come. And that's fact. And the other fact is there are not as many African Americans that are going into education for various reasons. And that's because we know that educators don't make a lot of money, but we do love our kids, and we're here in it because, in fact, we want to make a difference. And that is also fact. I think also when we went through COVID, I kept hearing that equity was realized. That's not true. Those who are disenfranchised, those who are underserved and marginalized, we already knew that equity did not exist. And so I know that you had a problem in terms of being woke, but I think a lot of this is an operation out of fear, because everyone feels, certain people feel that uncomfortable about what is my position going to be now if I allow you to have a slice of the pie. You can share a pie equally. You can share a pie equally. It doesn't mean that anyone's going to be diminished because you do just that. If anything, everyone's going to be lifted up more. And the true measure of strength is not how many people you bring down, but how many people you lift up. And so I just think that we need to look at doing just that, and I think this is a very valuable forum tonight, and I hope that all you guys take something from this.
Is it okay? Okay, thank you. My question, I don't know if there is a clear answer, but I wanted to know, how can any community member here who may not have a child in the system or anything like that, but how can someone accompany those educators, those people who are championing really equity in all spaces, but especially education? Do you guys have any examples? How can we stand up alongside the process?
Keep doing what you're doing right now, and make yourself visible in those school board meetings, and make yourself heard. You bring yourself, bring someone else. Let that person bring someone else. Pay it forward. And I can guarantee you, packing those rooms and showing people that you care is going to make a world of difference. Keep on having a voice, and be the voice for the voiceless. Because a lot of people may not have courage to say what you have to say, or may not be available to say the things that need to be said. But as long as you're representing those people and getting the word out and making sure that you still care and pack those school board meetings, I can guarantee you'll make a difference. And vote.
I don't know if you know this, but we're not really good at these conversations. And we're not practiced at them. So opportunities like this are opportunities to continue to have conversations. It's that acknowledgement that I was speaking of earlier. I think it's really important to continue this discourse and to invite people in who maybe don't agree with you. I think that's really important. I think that was part of the purpose of what we wanted to do tonight, but we've got to continue to have these conversations, because if we don't practice having these conversations, then we won't have these conversations. And we know we're uncomfortable doing it, which is why we don't like to tell people when they have stuff in their nose or their fly is open. So we know we don't want to have conversations about race, but we have to. And we have to build a callus around having these conversations and kind of live in the discomfort a little bit of talking about these situations, or else we won't solve them. And that, to me, is kind of the first step, is the conversation and the acknowledgement of them.
I have a question. This is an entirely different subject. How do teachers and the public deal with people who are falsely accusing them of grooming?
So the question was, how do you deal with people falsely accusing others of grooming?
Yeah, that's tough, but what I'm going to say is this. All educators are mandated reporters. There's a reason for that. We are here for the children, and while it is heinous to be falsely accused, I am much more of a fan of erring on the side of caution and allowing things to play out than being silent when there is even the hint of, a suspicion of, abuse. Because again, this is an institution of public trust, and trust erodes if children are coming to our schools and they are not safe. And so while I can empathize and sympathize with those who are wrongly accused, I would stand and say, hey, we're mandated reporters, we're about the children, it's better to err on the side of caution and let that process play itself out.
Principal of Emerald Hill Elementary School in Culpeper. I would love to talk to you more at another time, but I believe the lady in red, so here in Madison County, which I did have the pleasure of teaching under Mrs. Allen, and I was an administrator here in Madison County as well, but I believe the lady in red is referring to an article where some school board members in Madison County were accusing staff or using the word grooming, not as in what we think grooming is, but grooming as culturally responsive teaching was grooming for political or other reasons.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, you go ahead.
But isn't that what we're supposed to do as educators? I mean, that's definitely a piece with culturally responsive teaching. I think of one of the founders of our great nation, Thomas Jefferson, who said that when you have administrations, governments, right, that might be getting tyrannical, that might be doing something that's oppressing the people, you not only have a right, but an obligation to speak out. I mean, when we are thinking historically about every major event that has happened in our beloved America's history, hasn't it happened because someone was courageous enough and informed enough to dare to ask for change? So if we are grooming students to be activists, if we are grooming students to know who they are and speak out and advocate for them, that's not it. What did you mean? Okay, so you were right the first time. I was responding to the principle behind you. Okay, well then I guess the answer then is what Dr. Harris gave.
There was a representative, a Congress member from this great Commonwealth who suggested that by caring for LGBTQ students in our K-12 systems, that the systems themselves were grooming sexual behaviors because I have no idea why he said that. Abigail Spanberger, Congresswoman Spanberger, was very vociferous in her response that that was not correct.
If I can, to that point, that is analogous to saying just because we give children education on teen pregnancy prevention, that they're going to go out and get their peers pregnant. And the studies don't support that. So just because you bring an issue to light does not necessarily mean that you are advancing that particular cause. As a matter of fact, to the contrary, when children are more educated, they have more options and they are less likely to engage in said behaviors.
Okay, it is on. I'm Annette Hyde. I live here in Madison. People often quote Dr. King saying that we should judge the people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. They also say, like Dr. Gentry said, that we should all be colorblind. Does equity education run counter to that?
What I mean by that is that I want you to see me in all the things that I offer, and all of my differences. They are important. They define who I am, and that's what I mean by that. When we say, well, we don't see color, no, that's just observe. You see color, and there's nothing wrong with seeing color. And it's good that you don't treat me any differently because you see me as someone different. But I want you to acknowledge that we are different, and different is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I'm learning about you, and you're learning about me. I'm learning about your culture, and you're learning about mine. But I also like to say, too, we don't need to put everybody in one basket. Because I'm African American doesn't mean that my experience is going to be the same as hers, same as his, same as his. We all come from different backgrounds. And I think that as long as we start looking at people as well as being valued, worthy, and supported, and all the kids should be seen like this as well, we would be far better off than we are. But for Americans, a lot, we have to put everybody in a box. You're either heterosexual or you're not. You're either black or you're white. You're either rich or you're poor. You're old or you're young. Is that everyone has to always be defined. We're Americans, we're people, we are human beings. I'm part of the human race before any race, correct? And I think as long as we start treating people like that, I think we'd be way ahead, further ahead than we are right now.
Well, the fact is we have eyes. And some of you have taught colors in elementary school, and so we usually characterize those things as really beautiful, kind of the rainbow and the colors that we recognize. The fact is that me being a black woman is a very salient part of my identity. It's one of the things that has informed how I approach my life and my work and my learning. And so to not identify that in me means you don't see a portion of me that is really important. And so I don't think that means that that's the only thing that's important, but it is a very important thing to acknowledge and recognize. And why that's important to children is that they have eyes too. And they know that there are differences, at least on the surface. And what we need to acknowledge is that those differences don't make us any less deserving of care, any less deserving of being wrapped around as a community. And I just think it's really important to recognize that at the core of this discussion is that they're children, they're innocents, and people that we regard as our future. And if we can't all agree that that's something to value and to cherish and to take care of, we've got a lot of work to do.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Yeah, sure. Two more questions.
I have a question for you, for you all. First of all, thank you all for taking the time to do this forum. It's been very informative. I've appreciated it very much. So we understand that when Western civilization started the whole process of education, it was to build citizens, right, in ancient Athens, right, to build thinkers, poets, peacemakers, etc., right? So you could say that when education started, it was culturally responsive, right, to hit all the aspects of what we should be as a society, right? What can we do now in this day and age, or what is it that teachers need, either from their administrators or for the school boards that oversee their systems? What is it that you guys need, or what policies could be put in place that would allow you guys to put a critically or a culturally responsive curriculum in place and have it so that it remains outside of the political battles, outside of the cultural wars, outside of the, all the different things that we see on our TVs and hear on our radios. If that makes sense.
Well,
I would go back a little bit to Egypt, at least, when I'm talking about world civilization with Athens. But so let me just let that one be my point.
What would empower educators to actually put a culturally responsive curriculum in place and it not become like the next political football?
Courage. Courage. I mean, be honest with you, unless you have, like where I am now, we have culturally responsive teaching, but it's not done with fidelity. And so until you have a school system like in Albemarle County, who, despite the fact of what the governor said, you're going to still continue to do what's right by all children, it's going to take courage. And it's going to take courageous leaders to get us there. Despite the fact of what the governor is saying, we know that we're doing right by all children. And until that happens, then we're back at square one. But guess what? Keep fighting. Keep fighting.
Is it on? Sorry. Hi, my name is Matt Hooser. My question, Dr. Gentry, I loved everything you've said this evening. I've agreed with a lot of it. You talked about your personal experiences making you who you are, which they always differ from one or the other. My personal experiences, I mean, let's look around this room. I'm probably an oddball here, you know what I mean? But that's what made me come here tonight, because I wanted to reach out and talk to folks. And I did say something in a school board meeting a while back about bridging gaps. These are the type of conversation communities need to have. But it's my courage that I got from my service in the military and the experiences I've had that drove me to come here, right, where there's probably not a lot of folks from community that would do that. But on that note, Dr. Harris, I would like to know, you made a comment about something, and I quite didn't hear it all the way, so if maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about veterans and teachers or something. I didn't quite hear it all the way, but I just maybe can elaborate a little bit more. Do they make good or not good educators?
So the comment I made was an initiative taken by the state of Arizona, and there are a lot of states who are dealing with teacher shortages. And what they are doing is taking reserve officers and soldiers and bringing them in the classroom because they have a shortage. What I said was, my grandfather was a serviceman, my great-grandfather was a serviceman. I'm a military brat and a product of DOD schools. My father was a serviceman. While I have the utmost respect for servicemen, it does not necessarily mean that they will be better in the classroom than a person who actually went to school to teach.
Yeah, I got that part in too, so I was kind of thinking about it, right, and wanted to make sure that I understood, because there's the aspect about being in the military, there's a lot of education, a lot of teaching, so we might not be educated educators, if you will, but a lot of what we do, like I had a technical MOS, and as a individual, when I would get younger soldiers that would come in to that same job, MOS is a job, sorry, I don't mean to talk technical, but it was my job to make sure that they were up to speed. So a lot of what we do in the military is educating others or younger, and a lot of times the folks that come into like the lower enlisted ranks are not necessarily the best educated when they come out of school. I would probably point at myself as not being, I was a C average student, but I received a training from the military that helped me to go into, matter of fact, I worked with Misha's husband at a government contractor down the road for a while. So it helped me do those things, and I passed those things on to others. I would say my concern with making comments, I know you talked about the veterans not being great educators because it's the National Guard or reservists, but a lot of those folks are educators in their own way. They just don't hold that education degree that you yourself hold.
So my father his MOS was transportation, E6. Thank you for your service, first of all. My comment, let me clarify, was not to say that servicemen aren't educated. Again, I received my best education in Department of Defense schools before matriculating into high school. And so that was not the statement I was saying at all. I could sub it in and say firemen, policemen, doctors, lawyers, or anyone else who has not trained themselves for the profession of teaching. They would not necessarily be as good of a practitioner as those who have gone to school for it, hence why they go to school for it. Just like I've never been in the military, but I grew up eating MREs, I grew up wearing BDUs, and just because I saw my father do it, doesn't mean I'll necessarily be as good at it until I'm trained in it. So I want to make that clarification. I was not in any way saying that servicemen were not educated. I was saying that they may not be as good of an educator because they don't have the training in it yet. Okay?
And that would be in public school. But, sir, thank you so much for the question, and thank you so very much for your service. We appreciate it. No. But thank you very much for your service. Yep. But thank you. Thank you.
Got one in the back.
Evening. My name is Deanna McDonald, and I have a couple questions that kind of all go together, which is when I walk away from these things, I always wonder what exactly is the call to action. My understanding of school education and curriculum to the teachers who are doing the work, they don't necessarily have the power of what they're teaching. The curriculum decision comes from somewhere else. And so to your point about teachers being the professional, much like the doctor, the dentist, the lawyer, being the person trained to have the knowledge to teach, somebody else is making the decision about what is taught. And so for those people that need to have the courage that we're discussing to change the trajectory of what we're teaching and the issues within the school to move towards this culturally responsive teaching in a broader way, do you have resources available here for teachers to get help with advocacy to help them in that manner? Do you have information for the community members here that are actionable steps to help support move the needle, is my question.
Okay, and this is our final question because this is your call to action. This is our call to action. So panelists, can you please leave us, each of you leave us with what your call to action is for us as the Madison County, Culpeper County, Rappahannock County community?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. I was here at Madison County for 5 years, and they were good 5 years. When I decided to leave, it was a hard decision. Madison gave me opportunities that I was not given anywhere else, and so my heart will always be here in Madison. I do want to continue in the equity journey, and I would say for teachers, their call of action is they have a representative through the Virginia Education Association. They can continue to working with the school board and continue working with their principals and also continue working with the superintendent. They have a wonderful superintendent here. And so continue to work with them.
I'm hoping that we, the higher education community, receive really engaged students. And I think to do that, the skills training starts now. And to me, I can get really apocalyptic, but I won't. But it's really important that we support our teachers and our students on this journey. And I think you can be responsive in the classroom in ways that wrap around a student that allow them to get their needs met, so that we can have these engaged students that we want to have further along in their educational career. What I would say is that your local community colleges here to support. We support all of our students. We're open access. We are here to get students from A to Z, and it's really important that we do that for the reasons that we mentioned earlier. We need people to work. We need people to do the very practical things that we rely on in our lives, and we can't do that if they're not getting the things that they need in our school system. And so those are the practical implications of what we're talking about here, that we want neighbors and friends and maybe enemies that contribute to our communities. And if we can't do that, then we're kind of doomed. But I don't want to believe that. I believe that we can start here and start making progress related to that.
I'm going to go very briefly. I think that we're all called after this wonderful conversation to have more conversations. I don't think we're ever done with a one and done. I think there's so many layers to this, right? We could sit here for another 5 hours. Don't worry, I'm ready to start. Yeah. And, but I think part of the call to action, if I had to say briefly, is have more conversations. Have more conversations on even more focused topics, or maybe have conversations on even broader topics and hear from the community what it is they like or what it is they need. What we heard is that teachers might need guidance in how do I develop plans, lesson plans that are culturally responsive. I understand that the SOLs exist. How can I still comply with what's required on those SOLs and get to this culturally responsive stuff you're saying will help bridge that opportunity gap? So maybe a call to action is to work together from the state and even the local chapters to develop a list of resources by grade level and subject to see if that's helpful in terms of corresponding with the SOL. Or you might already have that, but that's what I'm hearing here. So I would say that's something that we probably had to do. And another is to keep believing that next generations are going to get better. As hard as it seems, if we ever lose that hope that things will get better, then we might as well just not even try anymore, right? But we've got to just remember that people coming after us, we need to kind of be those strong shoulders for them to stand on and lead by example, understanding that everything that we're getting to in the classroom is sometimes affected by policy change, but then having that courage to stand up to those that dictate policy and let them know I'm a citizen too, and this is what I'd like for you to address.
I'm going to echo a sentiment I actually learned as a kid in Frankfurt, Germany, when my father was in the military. And brother, I want you to please hear me, and that I thank you. My reiteration of what I was saying is me being heaven bent to hear you, and then me trying to clarify is the hope that you can also hear me. Because I believe that what is critically important is that we understand what I understood, what you understood at various duty stations. Even though we were on German soil, we were all Americans on that military base. It didn't matter what color we were. It didn't matter what faith we espoused. It didn't matter how long a particular family had been in the military. We were all Americans on that military base. You went to sleep when the TV turned off at about 12 o'clock and you heard the Star-Spangled Banner, and it didn't matter. We knew we were all on the same team. And I think, to my dismay, to my chagrin, one of the problems that we have in America is that we are no longer committed to being the United States of America. That we, in our mind, have decided that it's more important for me to be right, and for me to be right, you have to be wrong. That we have forgotten, as our servicemen fight for this country every single day, that even when we disagree, we are part of the same team. And that on that team there are different roles, right? Some people are called to be school board representatives, because if you don't run for office, you can't get mad at who's in office. Some are called to be teachers and administrators. Some are called as parents to be a part of the PTO to support the school system. Some are called with other wraparound services that augment what we're already doing and make education fuller. That whatever your role is, and whatever your perspective is, when you bring it to the table, you realize, hey, you might think that 2 + 3 is 5. I might think that 1 + 4 is 5. At the end of the day, it's 5. And that what is critically important is that even when we disagree, we are all a part of the same team. Our children cannot be educated optimally as long as we have decided that there are us's versus them. As long as we have decided that we have to win and they have to lose, as if we don't all lose. And so I would say, again, that's the lesson. However we move forward, know that we move forward as a team. At the end of the day, we want Madison children to learn. We want Culpeper children to learn. We want Rappahannock children to learn. We want children of the Commonwealth to learn. We want them to be the best people that they can be. And if we realize that, then even when we disagree, we'll be committed to a path forward. And I think we will regain some of what makes us Americans. Thank you all for coming. Please spread the word. Please do your part.